right. Okay, here we go, nerds. It's another episode of Swing Thoughts. Tim tells me this is episode number 182. It's Humble Howard from the Humble and Fred Show. Self-appointed golf's spiritual leader. Doesn't matter why, I just said I am. And of course, Coach Tim from the Guelph Griffins. And of course, you can use Tim for banquets, for weddings, for bar mitzvahs. He's available for coaching of every kind. OConnorGolf.ca. Tim, how are you, man?
Very good. Very, very good. Hey, did you play golf this week? It's been amazing weather.
I played on, I think, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday was when it got cold. But it's beautiful today. There's lots of guys playing fall golf.
I'm sure.
Have you gotten out since the official season ended? Are you...
No, I put them behind the furnace after the game that I and Ronan played. Nice. What was that? It was almost 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I had a pretty good round going, actually, on Tuesday. Maybe we'll talk about that with our guest today. If there was any guest in the entire time we've been doing this show that doesn't need a lot of introduction other than to say who he is and where he's from, I'll get to introducing him in a second. I also want to acknowledge the fact that we are graciously supported by TaylorMade Golf. What a great season using TaylorMade equipment. And, of course, the number one driver in golf. And, of course, Jonathan Wong Apparel, jwapparelinc.ca, I think. Anyway, as I said, this guest of ours really needs no introduction because for about the last 6 months, we've been playing a little drinking game here. And every time I mention decade, we hit this sound. And I don't know, it's got to be in the hundreds. Please welcome the man that created the system that has made such a difference in so many people's golf lives, including mine. Say hello to Scott Fawcett from Decade Golf. Look at you, pro. Look at you. Yes, we're all very excited.
Yes, please. More applause, more random audio files. That's fantastic. I appreciate all I can get.
Well, I wanted to. I was thinking this morning, anticipating you coming on. I'm like, where should I start with this man? A lot of people know the origin story of how Decade started. Legendarily now, you caddied for Will Zalatoris in the 2014 Texas Amateur. I'm doing this off the top of my head. This is how well I know your story. He caddied for, he caddied for Will, implemented this system he'd been thinking about. And I think that's part of the Decade origin story, as I say. But I want to talk a little bit before we get into the system and how it impacted me in particular and how it's impacted golf in general. I don't know if enough people really realize that you were a professional golfer at a pretty high level. Give us a little bit of the Scott Fawcett story and what happened, sort of the stumbles you had that led you to creating this system.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting comment because I spoke this week in Pinehurst at the Golf Magazine Top 100, and literally I played in the 1999 U.S. Open at Pinehurst. So when trying to think of my theme, the guy asked me to talk about things that could help the average player. And I was like, well, I can just tell you all the dumb stuff that I did in the U.S. Open, and I'll relate that to the average player because it really is incredible. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't specialize in golf until I got to college. And then once I got to college, I played a year at Sam Houston State and then took a year and a half off to transfer to Texas A&M. And then I played a couple semesters there, but then I broke my leg playing basketball with the basketball team because I'm a moron. Shockingly, that didn't pan out very well. So I really didn't even touch a club my last 15 months of school. Naturally, then I turned pro, even though I really hadn't played a whole lot of competitive golf technically in my life. And, I had a pretty good professional career, I would say. I mean, it was never what you would air quotes, say is successful, because the only thing successful in professional golf is, did I make millions on the PGA Tour or not? I did not. So, but I would say, I won 10 professional events, not like how you see guys like I had 87 professional wins and they were one-day deals on the Moonlight Tour or whatever. It's like I won some actual 72-hole events on the Hooters Tour and, essentially every tour aside from the ones you want to win on. But I really was just the prototypical idiot 24-year-old golfer who hits it really well, doesn't really understand putting. And, so I really, I would say, did decent. And then once I started working with Chris Como, once I quit playing professionally, I started playing a lot of poker and applying the poker math to it. And that's really what straightened out my brain for the most part, was just understanding poker odds and math and tournament situations, and that you're going to have bad beats. And it's really a perfect analogy straight into golf. So, my ability as a player is what allows me to see things differently in the data. You've obviously got a lot of really smart data people out there that are, 4 to 8 handicaps. And, there are times that we disagree on what the data says, and I'm letting my ability as a player let me see things differently. And I think that's one thing that, people don't really understand. It's easy to misinterpret what's going on when you're just purely looking at data. So my background as a player, I think, gives me a little bit different lens to look through.
But I'm also really interested in the data portion of it. Can you tell us a little bit about your math acumen, if you will? And was this what you studied in university?
It is. So whatever. I feel like I always have to apologize. I was in the gifted and talented classes as a kid, but it's honestly,
by the way, Scott, this podcast's on in Canada. You don't have to apologize for being smart. We're all about that.
Well, I just feel like I catch so much grief for being arrogant.
I'm sure in America you have to apologize for knowing some big words, but not here, my friend.
Well, I don't know big words. I'm good with math. I'm terrible with language. It's funny actually, though, because, and I don't know how this passed, it wouldn't happen in these days, but the day we used to have to go to this gifted and talented class one day a week. And the day that we went was actually the day that we had heavy focus on English and grammar. And it's funny because, like, I suck at writing. I mean, I'm terrible at it. I don't make videos because it's easier. I make videos because I can't write. But so, I'm pretty good with math. I'm definitely not on the levels of the other stats guys out there. I mean, when we start talking Z-scores and regression analysis, like, I understand what we're talking about there, but I'm gonna have to go get a refresher course on Khan Academy to do it. But what I actually did a ton of was those grid style logic problems, like whatever branch of the spectrum that I fall on myself.
Yeah, maybe
there we go.
It's not so good for you.
Whichever branch of the spectrum I fall on definitely gave me the singular focus on those logic problems. And so I could do those at a ridiculous clip, and I would just sit down for hours and hours and doing it. And I think that that's honestly what, kind of gives me the view that I have, where, and again, it's why I like debating so much. I feel like I'm just operating on a different level than a lot of people whenever I'm seeing where this is going because of a background in logic. So to Tim's question, math, again, I'm pretty good with math. So I've got finance and economics degrees. And again, it really is pretty basic expectation math. I mean, the MIT Sloan people asked me to come or started the conversation with me coming to the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. And I'm like, okay, but I need to sit up there and tell you weighted average math. It's not going to be nearly as exciting or interesting.
But you saw something in golf that a lot of people didn't see. The strokes gained fellow, Mark Brody.
Yep.
He saw something there. And I think that I'll ask Howard his input on this, is that you saw a relationship between playing the game and seeing the hard data that wasn't really recognized by a lot of people, whether they be professionals or amateurs. Howard, what did you think?
Well, I mean, strokes gain hasn't been around that long. A lot of people don't realize, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 2004 as Brody's book came out. But
no, 2014.
2014, right. So it hasn't been around for a long time. But I'm not really sure, what you're asking me to comment on as far as Scott goes, but I was going to say Tim and I are the opposite of you, Scott. I don't know about you, Timmy, but when they introduced algebra in school, I just watched those. I think I saw the Pythagorean theorem come whizzing by me and splat on the wall behind, but I was always able to, articulate verbally, which is, another right brain.
I knew that those were letters A and B. And stuff,
That's right.
Well, there's our first problem. If we're going to layer in the Canadian versus American thing, if they're teaching the Pythagorean theorem, which is geometry and algebra, no wonder you couldn't figure it out.
Well, I just
See, there you go.
When they introduced it, I was like, I don't think this is for me. I'm good at addition. I can do my times tables. But let's just go back to, when the strokes gained data started was around, ironically, the same time in 2014 that you were working with Zalatoris, and you were, again, back to your origin story. You'd gotten out of professional golf and you had gotten into business quite successfully. And then you started to get this notion of all these things coming together. Maybe this will help with Tim's question about all these ideas, mathematical concepts, Brody's strokes gained. When did it all kind of, like the Matrix, all come together for you? And you went, oh, I have an idea.
Well, it wasn't ironically at about the same time. It was because of I would not have been able to do what I did without Mark Brody's work. I mean, he is the godfather of modern golf statistics. But like I say, I was when I quit playing professional golf back in 2001. I started playing some illegal. I think the statute of limitations has run now, but some illegal underground card games here in Dallas, and I actually met Chris Como. That's where Como and I met, not at a golf course, was playing poker, and he and I have spent a couple of years really going deep with, this what's called push fold analysis for tournaments, with what you should and shouldn't be doing in any given situation. We went really deep with making these math-based charts as to how you should play poker. And like I say, that was the first place that, again, somehow, some way, I never really thought of golf as a math game. But at the end of the day, it really is a math game with a physical component, as opposed to like backgammon is a math game with a luck component introduced by dice, and poker with cards and blah, blah, blah.
I think alcohol is involved with both.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's a factor. It's a variable you've got to factor in. That would be like under the A portion of decade. That's the analyze. Well, I actually gave a speech back in 2015 or 16 at the college coaches convention. And I literally, the night before my presentation, was playing poker with a number of the college coaches, and this drunk cowboy came walking up, and I just dismantled this guy for about $4,000. And I actually changed my entire presentation that night to basically explain that hand, but then relate it to golf. We're in Vegas, and I probably went up to the podium with a vodka Red Bull in hand. So let's have some fun. But so it was really playing a lot of poker. And then I went back and, I got to where I was playing pretty good golf. I entered Q school in 2008 as a 35-year-old amateur, just because of a bet, honestly. And I got through all 4 stages, which is, something I didn't accomplish as a 25-year-old as a full-time playing professional. I'm the oldest amateur to make it to the final stage of Q school by 13 years, which I highly doubt will be broken, just because nobody's dumb enough to enter Q school as a 35-year-old amateur. But it was really then going out and playing for a couple of years with my math brain turned on, but still didn't have any actual data. And then in 2011 was when they started releasing the strokes gained putting statistics, which was the first time I realized anything about ShotLink or like anything at all was going on. And I quickly realized, like I wrote a thread, thank God, in 2011 on an online poker forum called 2+2 that was just, is dry for show, putt for dough really true? I like to think I was the first person to really start questioning that from a math basis. And so I had a couple of years of really starting to think and debate. It's funny, that forum actually has like 6 guys that run analytics for like the Raptors and Chiefs. Like there's actual real data guys that have come out of this online poker forum, hopefully including me. And then when the book was released, well, not the book was released, just some excerpts from the book were being released in late 2013. I realized I could take all of these launch monitor, TrackMan and quad shot pattern statistics and start intertwining them with strokes to hole out statistics. So if I know how many strokes it takes for me to hole out from here, and then I know how many strokes it takes to hole out from the next place, I can judge whether or not that was a good shot. But then it also just made me realize what it's funny, as a guy who sells a stats portal for a living, I really don't find stats very interesting. For the most part, you kind of know what you need to work on. And sure, there's things we can tighten up, but you always run into sample size as a problem in golf. And so I don't really find those very interesting. I actually, unlike any other of the stats nerds, I use strokes gained statistics almost exclusively to teach people strategy. I should say the ShotLink data to teach people strategy, tour players at least. And then I use that same logic and ideas in order to go through my players or my members, the decade members, stroke trails visuals, to say this is an outlier shot and it's in a unique situation that it just doesn't quite make sense to me. And 99% of the time, when you finish a round of golf and think you should have shot lower, it's going to be because of a strategic or a mental mistake, not because of something physical. Like, I should 3-putt less, or I should hit 7 irons better. But yeah, that's not really where it's buried.
Well, and listen, I've got a bunch of notes from things that I've benefited from and talked about on the show this season. I shared some of them with you, Scott, when we were sort of doing some planning for my senior am. But I want to get into, so this all came out in 2014. I want to get to the part where you decided, hey, there's so much of this information. I'll share it in a system I call Decade. And just to refresh everyone, in case you don't know the acronym, is distance, expectation, correct target, analyze, discipline, and execute. And me personally, and we'll get into this later, what it did for me in 2017, and then subsequently in this spring when we had the lockdown, the number one takeaway for me was expectation management. All the other parts and discipline, expectations and disciplines for me were the biggest, I think the single biggest contributor to the handicap lowering that I had through this season. I'm going to get into that. But for you around 2014, 15, when did you say, I can take all of this and make something of it?
Well, I mean, I really was just creating Decade. It wasn't obviously called Decade at the time. It was just a math-based strategy deal for myself. Like I'm pretty good at golf. I really would like to win the US Mid-Am in order to play in the Masters. And so when I got my amateur status back after going and playing professionally that second time was in 2013. And that's when the data started coming out. And I realized if I could optimize course management, everybody always talks about the Tiger and Jack were the two greatest course managers of all time. And I just started thinking, well, what if we could actually quantify that? And I'm the only one that knows it. Like I really thought that I could beat people pretty bad. And so Zalatoris at the time was just a struggling junior, heading off to Wake Forest that next fall for his freshman year. And I had an injury that I've luckily now rectified with 2 elbow surgeries this year, but I had an injury. And so I called Will up to ask him if I could just caddy for me. He was just a junior golfer at my home course. And she said, let me caddy for you next week in the State Am. At the time, he'd really never won anything, but a high school golf tournament. Let me caddy for you. And, if you just do what I tell you to do, you'll win. And, he won by 3, which I really didn't think he would.
Just do what I tell you to do and you'll win.
I wish that worked with my teenagers. Just do what I tell you to do.
Well, it wouldn't. If I were his dad, it would not have worked. But again, part of the deal, when before I settled on the acronym Decade, I bought the domains beyourownCaddy.com because as I was out there with him, I was like, man, I sure am being a whole lot nicer to him than I would to myself.
Oh, totally.
But what was important to that was I actually was meaning it. Like when he hit it off into the trees a few times, I was like, no big deal, dude. We're going to get it out of there. We're going to salvage bogey. It's not going to be the end of the world. And importantly, like I say, I actually believed that when I told him that. It's just not that big of a deal. And, so here we are plodding along in the first round. And we were like 6, 1 under through 6 or 7. And I was just like, this is so dumb. This kid is so much better than we're playing way too conservative. But we're under par, screw it. Let's just finish this out. And he shot like 67 or 8 in the first round. I was just like, that was so simple. It's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And we go back out the next day and, he just runs the table the entire weekend. Even as the pressure started mounting, we really then doubled down on focusing on our targets and just letting, variance dictate the great results and intentionally avoiding mistakes. And, Jason Enlow, who I've known since we were in junior and college golf, he was the SMU coach at the time. He saw us out there at the Texas Amateur and walked a few holes and whatever. We talked a little bit about it, but not much. At the US Junior, then we talked a little bit more. And he called me after the US Junior. He's like, dude, I kind of got an idea of what you're doing here, but Bryson plays way too aggressively. DeChambeau, he plays way too aggressively. I feel like Bryson's entered the realm of a one name person where, when I say Tiger,
yeah, Bryson, exactly.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah, Bryson's finally entered that. I guess Brooks, it's nice to have a unique name. Scott doesn't really mean a whole lot.
Yeah, believe me, no one's going, well, there is Howard, Howard Stern, but
that Howard in radio.
So Bryson's coach calls you up and says, hey, how about you work with this kid?
Yeah, that was the entire, I didn't have some master plan. I'm going to be talking to humble Howard and Tim O'Connor down the road where I just was trying to help Zalatoris.
Well, you don't want to dream that big, Scott. Easy now.
No. That's you got to stay grounded, pal.
Well, let's get into some of the nuts and bolts then.
Sure.
And again, a lot of the stuff that Scott has sort of set the table here today, a lot of it you can read and go to the golf. He's got a great article. I think it was Golf Digest, the last one that was quite extensive about how it all started. But I think the takeaway is that you were a very, very good golfer. And a lot of people might go, well, that's great if you're Scott Fawcett or Bryson DeChambeau and you can play the game at that level. And one of the things I've talked about with Scott, and we've talked a lot about on this show, is how so many of these ideas inside the Decade system, we'll say, are so germane for the average player. And I've said that I think that, if you want to be a low handicap player or an elite amateur or be a professional, this is great. But if you're a 14 handicap, there's so many things inside of this that are simple and easy to understand. And you don't need to get into the nerdy stats at all. I want you to talk. What do you think of this statement, Scott? I've been quoting you for 6 months now by saying that guys I play with that are wondering how I lowered my handicap, and I said, well, this guy Fawcett says it's easier to not do things than to do things. One of the first things when I started delving into the app itself and doing the foundations, I was like, what? And one of the first things you say is stop trying to make birdies. And then you articulate it by saying it's easier to not do things. Talk about that.
Well, again, that's the main one when I say I let my ability as a player let me see something different in the data than the regular data people. That's really the main one I'm talking about, because I know for me to really hit a shot that matters, and again, this is subject to so many caveats, but to really hit a shot that matters, you kind of need to get it inside of about 8 feet. Well, shot patterns are so massive. There's really, I mean, even with a sand wedge, you just don't, I mean, especially at the amateur level, you just don't hit that many shots inside of 8 feet, period. But it's not that hard to hit the green. But also, interestingly, middle of the green is usually bad advice also. It's why the game is just so hard to learn. And so, really it started about 2 years ago. I was just looking at some data in the app, and I honestly didn't realize how many guys bought the app and enter every single shot that average over 80. And I was looking at some of these numbers. I'm like, my God, there's a lot of really big scores in here. And so I had my data guys like, you know what? Find out what those people plugged in as their handicap. And then let's take their first 5 scores that they enter and compare it to the next 10 scores. And it was like 80% of the guys improved by over 4 shots in that time span. And I was like, that's just crazy. But it made me realize our initial product at the time was just Decade Light and Decade Elite. And Light was literally nothing more than a placeholder so we could get it in the App Store. I did not put any effort whatsoever into it, and nobody bought it. But when I saw how many people were buying the Elite version that were, 80 plus shooters, I realized I needed to make content curated just with them in mind explicitly. So that's why I created Foundations over, basically from now through Valentine's Day 2 years ago, because I really wanted to address those things that guys, I know you're not a 85 shooter, but to address those average type players, because it is just hard. So yes, it's easier to intentionally not lose strokes than it is to intentionally gain strokes. And that's, it sounds like semantics, but it's really not. When you're standing out there, even on the PGA Tour from 130 yards, you're just not averaging that much under par. And it's those little pedantic mistakes and silly bogeys, again, that when you finish a round of golf and you think you should have shot lower, it's always those, well, I made that bogey from 110. I 3-putted from 20 foot from trying to make that putt. Those are the things that it's easier to just try to 2-putt it. Just make sure you hit the green, and then just let the variance within your shot pattern and approach shots create the tight shots, and the variance within your shot pattern will just let the hole jump in the way of some 20 footers. But exactly. For the most part, we're trying to tap in a whole bunch from 20 feet.
Well, before we jump in there, Tim, I just want to clear this up, because what Scott just said is part of the idea of and I just had this conversation a couple of days ago I played with a couple really good players the other day, and we were all playing nicely, but we were talking about the idea, and because somebody asked me, how did you get your handicap down? I said, well, I stopped 3-putting, and how I stopped 3-putting is I stopped trying to sink 25-foot putts. Like I realized, Tim and I played a few years ago, Scott, and I was hitting it pretty good that night. We played on a little men's night tournament, and I think I hit 13 greens that night and shot like 76 or 77. And I asked Tim after, like, what did you see in my putting? And we were trying to think about what I was doing wrong. But what I was mentally doing wrong was trying to sink 30-foot putts. So not trying to make birdie with a 30-footer was easier, I found this year. Just getting it, working on speed, it seems simple. But that one little thing about not trying to make birdies from long distance, it really made a difference. Timmy, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say that I think this really comes home to our listeners. The average player is just learning to make smarter decisions, and what not to do. And the thing that was really concrete to me, the difference between, I hit it in the woods or whatever, in the gunch, and then, trying to hit like the little hero shot, I'm going to hit the little draw here and hit it over there, rather than punch it out of the fairway, get it onto the green, and make, sometimes make par, but a soft bogey at best. That made such a massive difference in my game. And one of the things that we talked about from what Howard says, it lowers the thermostat. When you're making shots that are in your wheelhouse. There's not the same amount of tension or concern. Oh, is this going to work out? Whereas if you are trying to blast it out of the trees and hit this like little window, there's all this tension of what could go wrong. So that's my experience.
I think it's interesting you bring that up too, because Scott, because we basically spent 182 shows talking to people, from teaching pros to mental, PhDs about the mental side of the game. And what I love about what this system does is the strategy, understanding strategy and scoring actually helps with the mental side of the game because, we've all heard, play the safe shot, don't follow a bad shot with another bad shot. But when you know that bogeys, won't kill you at the amateur level, but, if you know that a double bogey is a full, stroke, 1 point, whatever strokes gained lost or whatever strokes lost, knowing that a bogey is going to be okay strategically helps you understand that, thermostat wise or tension wise, it's not the worst thing. Soft bogeys and soft pars. But the strategic part of Decade, the expectation management, I think, is one of the big takeaways. And again, it's a simple thing to say to somebody: stop trying to make birdies, because if you want to be a scratch golfer, you got to make 5 or 6 birdies around. But as I found
the one
out
comment that I wanted to make from what you said earlier, though, Howard, was a 25-foot putt where you 3-putted it by trying to make it. On the PGA Tour, 25-foot putts make rate is 12%. So if you never 3-putted it, the strokes to hole out would be 1.88. The actual number on tour is 1.934. Like, we can almost round that up to 1.944. There's literally, it's a 500ths, which doesn't sound like much, but there's a 500ths penalty even on tour from 25 feet that's related back to 3 putts. And if your make rate's only 12%, like, you just can't offset. You can't make enough putts to offset those. If you eliminate those silly 3 putts,
yeah.
And again, I hate saying this because I'll 3-putt from 25 foot several times, but it's just not that hard to 2-putt from 25 feet and just let the hole accidentally jump in the way of a few and your make rate will be fine.
Well, yeah, you're right, Scott. It's not hard to 2-putt from 25 feet, but mentally, if you're trying to make it, if that's your intention, then it is hard to 3-putt or to 2-putt from 25 feet. I can't tell you, like, one of the first things that made the biggest difference for me was my 3-putt rate went down. Like, it plummeted because I just made the adjustment that, in fact, I think in the Decade app, it says the inflection point on the PGA Tour at 30 feet, they're as likely to make that putt as that's when they start to,
it's 32 feet.
They're going to 3-putt as they are going to make it. Well, what's the rest of us? So for me, I've decided that my point is 20 feet. At 20 feet, I'm just starting to try and roll it up there. In fact, I said to Timmy, I don't even put the line on the ball until I'm within 15 feet or less. The rest of the time, I'm just knocking it up there so that I can just tap in the next one. So you think, well, if I want to be a scratch golfer, I have to make 5 birdies around. No, you don't. You just have to not 3-putt, no penalty shots, stop 2-chipping. And what's the other big one?
I was looking at a stat over here, so I didn't catch what you were saying there. I knew where I was going to go. The Tiger 5 is how many double bogeys, how many bogeys on par 5s, how many 3-putts, how many blown easy saves, which we turn into 2 chips, and how many bogeys with 9-iron or less, which we turn into bogeys from inside 150. There you go.
Wow.
I mean, but your question that I was trying to look up over here was, what's that number of strokes to hole out? I mean, and again, I look at putting as a totally separate game to ball striking. So rather than tracking it by handicap, I track it by your strokes gained putting performance. But if I had to guesstimate, I would bet the average scratches 2 putts, so it takes you 2 to get down, is probably right around 25 feet. And I would bet it doesn't take very, very high to get that number down to 20 and then even 15 for your 10 plus handicaps. I mean, it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot shorter than you think. And again, you just can't make enough putts. Well, it's similar to, the idea of one of Lou's great stats. Obviously, I've said forever that y'all suck to front hole locations for the PGA Tour players, and he does a great job with the data. He quantified that number and turned it into 160 to 180 in the fairway. The PGA Tour players hit 57% of greens to front hole locations and 71% of greens to back hole locations.
Wow.
Like, that's incredible. You can't make enough birdies to offset hitting 14% fewer greens solely due to poor target selection.
Right.
That's it. You can't do it. So I don't care what you are thinking to front hole locations. you simply can't try to attack them. Again, I'm even talking at the tour level here. And what's funny is I don't even show. I've obviously got that one shot link image that I use so often with y'all suck to front hole locations for this top 100 presentation I just gave. I actually showed them the third round hole location, which was the middle hole location to that exact same pin on 13 at Riviera. And there's only maybe 10 or 12 balls that are past even the middle hole location. Like coming up long, like that's one of the biggest old cliches that is just false. Well, it's true, but it's not a problem, is that you can't make a living from going long on tour. Like you can't make a living from going past the pin on the PGA Tour to a back hole location, but there's exactly 0 humans on this planet that come up long too often. Everybody comes up short way too often to every single hole location.
Timmy?
Wow. Well, the thing that I find really interesting about this is because like Howard's taken the deep dive. Quite frankly, I'm considering, Scott, really close to signing up for the elite package for next year. Okay, so put me on.
You don't want to quit your job, do you? Because that's what I did.
I know. No, but
as an influencer, Tim, I'll give it to you, buddy.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, there you go. That's
was that the ask? I could have gotten it for you for free.
Yeah, that was the ask. That was very strategic on my part. No, it wasn't. Okay. The area that has so interested me in golf for a long while now is how golfers, they have a bad round and they immediately think, oh, it's my mechanics. I'm not in the slot. I'm doing this. This is wrong. And so they start to go down, they go to the range and, they have a thought about the thing to do. And then that's not working. And then they try another thing. And then they're down this rabbit hole of mechanics and tension and just all these thoughts to me, which is just really self-sabotaging, self-interference. But what I think about what happens with Decade is that if you're making sound strategic decisions, you're that much less prone to making what we call a bad swing, because you're going to feel more relaxed. And it's just something that, you can just see the shot, your body's more comfortable. You kind of have this unconscious sense of, I got this. That's my sense of it. Scott, what's your take on that?
I mean, again, I'm not an instructor. I do not teach mechanics. And yet I essentially, in my opinion, talk players, even on the PGA Tour, just talk them into playing good pretty often. I had a call just a couple of weeks ago from an agent that said, I've got a guy that's a world beater. He just doesn't quite seem to be getting it. Well, I go do a little dive into that guy's stats, and he'd missed 7 of his last 11 cuts, dating all the way back to May, but he did have a 5th and an 8th place finish. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Like, that's one of the things I'm looking for to know you're trying to force things a little bit too much. And so you go in a little bit deeper, and this guy's strokes gained putting was just horrific. I mean, absolutely horrific. And I didn't go fly out to Vegas and give the guy a putting lesson. I said, dude, first of all, do you have the yips? No. Okay. I'm going to take you at your word on that. If you don't have the yips, being -2 strokes gained putting is literally impossible unless you're trying to make every single putt. You can go do a little bit of a long short. How many putts are you leaving short? And he's not leaving nearly enough short. And so my advice to that guy was, here's a couple speed drills that we're going to, have you do. And then I need you to leave like 25 or 30% of your putts short from 20 feet. And trust that it's like a normal distribution curve of depth in putting. So I didn't work on his stroke at all. I told him to leave some putts short, stop trying to make putts. And the guy went out. His name is Keith Mitchell. He was 16 under through 27 holes that week with a 5-shot lead. He finished third and gained 1.3 strokes gained putting for the week, which is, 5 and changed for the week. He had been -2 for his first 2 events. He made $565,000 that week, finishing third, which is his second biggest check ever on tour. And I'm just laughing like, we didn't do anything, and I need to negotiate percentages in advance.
I would say
exactly. But what's interesting is that how this goes against golf culture, if you will. Golf culture is, you're not playing well, go to the range, dig it out of the dirt, take a lesson, whatever. What you were saying sounds absolutely revolutionary.
But it's also
not. No, hang on a sec. Simple. He's not leaving enough putts short. I've never heard someone say that before. That is so cool.
If you were a Decade member like myself,
that's okay. But majority of our listeners are not, but they will be. But that is so cool.
But it's one
not
of the
leaving enough putts short.
I'll tell you, Tim, it's one of the things that made me a better putter is because when you read that and you think, wait a second, I'm supposed to leave putts short, and I tracked all my stats this summer. And I, at one point, the app actually urged me, because that's what it does. The app will say, okay, here's some areas you're having some trouble in, or we think this might be. And I got pushed the ladder drill a couple times. Because most people, when they're 25 feet from the hole, they've heard you're supposed to hit every putt 17 inches, whatever Pels says, 1 foot to 17 inches. But if you're not leaving enough of them short, too many of them are going by 4 and 5 feet. And even on the PGA Tour, the make rate at 4 feet is 88%, or is it 5 feet, 88%?
It's 4 feet, it's 88%. But most importantly, that's 3 foot 1 inch to 4 foot. That's not even 4 foot. That's like 3.5 foot is 88%. And again, the main thing that allows me to just see this information different is not just my ability as a player, but my lack of ability as a player. My biggest holdup was not my physical skills. It was for sure my emotions. I was a absolute lunatic back in the day. And I mean, I was a great ball striker, so I thought I could do anything with a shot. So you're just constantly trying to force things. You're constantly trying to do far more than you're capable of, but then more importantly, far more than is necessary. And that's, again, I just use this canned joke all the time, but if you're finishing every round thinking you should have shot lower, you're either not as good as you think you are, or you made mental and strategic mistakes. There literally can be nothing else.
Totally.
Well, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Tim, but it's funny what Scott was saying about working with Keith Mitchell or other players. What I think, traditionally in golf, if you had a bad putting round, like the round a few years ago I played with Tim, and I was like struggling with my putting and I couldn't figure it out, and I had to look at my stroke and go practice. And I'm thinking, well, no one practices more than me. How am I not? And I lamented this for years. I'm skill-wise, certainly hit it good enough to be scratch, but I struggled because of those type of mistakes. I thought the answer was solely is if I could just get my golf swing to be bulletproof, which no one's is, but I tried. I thought if I could just get that to be bulletproof, then eventually these scores would come down. But a simple little thing that you just said, try and leave 25 or 30% of your putts short. Well, all of a sudden I stopped 3-putting. So there were 3 shots around on average where I was gaining strokes on the green from simply not sinking anymore, just sinking, not having as many 3-putts. And the entire system is littered with stuff like that.
But I love
even
this. Go ahead, Scott.
Even if you were bulletproof, like we're going to make our swings perfect and bulletproof, even if you did accomplish that, golf is the largest outdoor sport played with the ball in the air, the longest of any sport. And a 10-mile-an-hour wind isn't 10 miles an hour, it's 5 to 15. 20 miles an hour isn't 20 miles an hour, it's 10 to 30. That variance in wind makes even a robot not play the game well. I mean, again, we all remember that robot that at TPC Scottsdale a few years ago that hit the hole in one is like, oh my God, this robot hit a hole in one. Yeah, it also missed the green left and right. So, I mean, it's just, again, I do feel like people leave my seminar pretty dejected quite often. Like, why am I playing this game if it's so hard? But the game is simply so hard that you have to play it correctly, which at the end of the day then makes it really easy, especially if you understand the data, not from some sort of a rocket scientist data standpoint, but from some sort of a lunatic expectation management standpoint. That's what the data is best for. And I feel like, again, that's the one thing that I really focus in on with my players. But really, back to Keith Mitchell, because it wasn't just putting. Here he is. He's been consistently his 4 or 5 years on tour. He's been in the top 10 in strokes gained driving like 3 of the 4 years, and it was like 20th the other year. And he's 150th or worse basically every year in strokes gained approach. And what I have to tell a guy like that is, you're a world beater. Everybody says you stripe it. Tell me about your driver, Keith. Do you work it both ways? No, I only hit a cut. Tell me about your irons, Keith. Do you work it both ways? Well, yeah. How's that working out? And it's just funny because one of the main things that I get from people is everything I teach is common sense. I'm like, here's a PGA Tour winner that had never heard of approach putt performance, and he hadn't put together, I'm not working my irons really well. And what I got to tell a guy like that is like, look, dude, I'm just not buying it that you're great with your driver and you can't hit a gap wedge. And if you can't, put it back 2 balls in your stance and hit down on it, and it's going to pan out. You're trying to work it too much both ways because you're trying to make birdie with your second shot. You're not trying to make birdie with variance. And that's the difference. You make birdies with variance, not by intentionally as a fader stepping up there and drawing this 6-iron from 210 to a back left hole location. Like, it's just insane. Again, I don't disagree that should be common sense. And it is once you see it, but it sure as hell isn't before you see it.
But again, it's so interesting to me is that, okay, leave putt short. Oh yeah. And risk being called Alice. Or people who go like, okay, well, I'm supposed to, I'm a right-hander and it's a back left. I'm supposed to draw this in. And so people, and then they have another shot. It's a front right. I'm going to fade it in. Well, goodness, if you're like a 10 handicap and you play once or twice a week, good luck working it both ways. So I just think you say it's common sense, but again, it goes against this golf culture of expectations. Oh, how will I be judged as a player, etc. Whereas what I think is just so cool, Scott, is that you've shown it makes way more sense to rely on, this is your shot. If you hit a fade, hit the gosh darn fade, even if you got to draw a situation.
That's, obviously I'm giving one of my former associates a hard time by saying, what does a 6 know about the game really at the end of the day? But I posted a video about Tiger doing the 9-box drill that someone had posted recently. And the fades were just dead straight. And then it was like the wind, like it was blowing about 4 off the right. No, he just didn't quite fade it. The 9-box drill is hard. And then that other guy, he posts, I'm a big proponent of practicing this way. And I'm like, you're a 6. You don't actually work with players. You're not an instructor. Maybe that's why you're a 6. And again, 6s are decent players, but I just don't really care that you think practicing with a 9-box drill is great, because it's not working for basically anyone, tour players included. And again, even a guy like Tiger, who I'm the biggest Tiger lover on the planet, he's really, really good at doing the 9-box drill with his irons, and he's horrendous at it with his driver. And there's also not anything to say that just because he's really good at doing it with his irons and he's one of the best iron players of all time, that he wouldn't be better if he did it a little bit less. Like, that's possible. It's entirely possible.
But I think
know it is for me.
If you're a 6 handicap and you're trying to hit draws into back left flags, you're not Tiger.
No. And
Justin Thomas doesn't even try and do it.
Well, but I will tell you, I used to do that. That was my part of my strategy. And then this year I stopped. I'm like, okay, I sort of gently hit a bit of a draw most of the time. And the odd time when I block it, part of my, shot pattern, well, yeah, that happens too. Sometimes I hit the hot pull. Yes, that shows up. But and I don't know if we're doing a great job today of really, because I'm so excited to have Scott here. I got to be honest.
I'm doing a great job. I don't know about
you're
you.
doing a great job. But I don't know if we're doing a great job of contextualizing this, because I'm so excited to have you here. I've got 1,000 things I want to say to you. But just generally, again, back to the reason we do this show is that Tim and I are intensely interested in how, your mental, acumen and your mental state management. It's a big, buzzword here on Swing Thoughts. But I was, and it's legendary on the show, how many clubs I threw, how angry I got, how much I pouted, what a big suck I was, how I was not fun to play with, and I was never as good as I thought I should be. I had a guy say this to my face a couple years ago. You should be better than you are. Very few people would say that, because considering how much I tried, practiced, got lessons, went to teachers, famous and not famous, and it wasn't until I took the seminar that I started to make these incremental changes. So when I say I'm excited to do this show with you, it's because I couldn't have tried any harder. Tim knows me very well. Nobody tried harder at the amateur level than I did. And when I met Scott in 2017, I sent you a note. You wouldn't remember this, but shortly after that seminar, I had my lowest round in years. And then over this course of 3 or 4 summers, I got better and better. But it was until this lockdown, and I wrote it down here. The lockdown ended on, I think it was the 24th of May. And I was about a 2.2 at that point. My lowest handicap last summer was 1.9. I sent Fawcett a note after studying a decade for 6 weeks. I said, hey, I'm a 1.9 or so. What are my chances? Do you think I can? No, I said, do you think I can get to scratch this year? And he wrote me back one word: guaranteed. And I was like, well, that's pretty cocky. He said, I guarantee it. He said, if you work this system And then on June 29th, my handicap went down to 0.9. On July 2nd, it was 0.2, and I'm a +1 now. And I haven't gotten, well, and thank you, but Tim's played golf with me recently and over the years. I hit it pretty good. I'm not hitting it that much better than I ever did. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah,
I mean, the day I shot 76, I didn't hit it much better than when you played with me and I shot even par. But even par is now my standard score. You know, I've done my stats. I had more rounds under par, more rounds under 70, more rounds of par or better. And why? My skill level didn't change, but my strategy and my scoring ability. I'll finish this sermon by saying my strategy ability really informed my scoring in a profound way. Because if you go from 2 to 0, that's very, very difficult. And again, as I say, I couldn't have tried harder before I met you. It was unbelievable.
I mean, again, it's a very Yoda thing to say, but to gain control, one must give up control. It just really is. There are some great old cliches that are just true. And I mean, again, I get emails. It's awesome, but it's also challenging. I get emails and direct messages every single day. Someone will send me a wall of text that is just like, I got to read this. I mean, this guy put this much effort into sending me this, and it's crazy me. And then I got to reply, and I don't want to reply with just yay. So it's just hard.
Son.
But I get those every single day, and it is amazing to just see. Again, I'm not gonna say it's easy. It's really, really hard to play patient, disciplined golf. It is the entire reason that I started talking about expectation management and discipline. That's why, because if you'd asked me 7 years ago when I first started doing this, I would have told you I'm a math whiz. This is all math. It's the strategy. 7 years removed, it is all the psychology. That is all that it is. I have said this for years, that the most important stat that you can track in the Decade app is the mental scorecard. I really do not find statistics very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I got a tour player today, a European Challenge Tour player that asked me to look at his stats. He's averaging 69.5 while losing a stroke putting. I go to all his make rates. They're all terrible. And at the end of the day, I'm like, let's just pretend you do have the yips. There's nothing we can do about that. So what are we going to do in order to putt better? We're going to work on our speed, because his speed control is just terrible. You can see that in the data also. So at the end of the day, work on your speed, stop trying to make putts. You can't really be worse than -1 at that level. Like, it's pretty hard to do that for a season. You've got to be pretty yippy. But once you understand to just focus on your speed, the hole will magically jump in the way of some 20-foot putts. And that gains you almost a full shot back. And so you can afford to have a pretty low make rate. I mean, it's pretty much impossible to be more than about 10% worse in any given bucket, and inside of the 5 to 8 foot range on tour. So even if you're terrible, from 3 to 5 foot, they have 2.6 putts in that bucket per day. Even if you are 10% worse, which would be, I mean, literally impossible to do on tour. Well, 2.6 attempts times 10% worse is a quarter of a shot. It's not ideal, but it's also not the end of the world. It's the end of the world when you let that quarter of a shot impact your next shot or your next putt. That's bad. But just missing, I mean, even what would be an astronomical amount of putts from 3 to 5 foot, again, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but it really doesn't matter much, because you can offset those with a disproportionately high make rate from outside 20 feet. And I think that's the one that actually will be interesting to see how those type of make rates shake out when we refresh strokes gain statistics over the next 5 years. Will those baseline numbers change? And I certainly expect they will, because again, I mean, literally with almost 100% success rate, when I talk to a player for the first time that week and walk them through everything, so they're fresh and they're excited about it, they have one of their best events ever, literally almost 100% of the time.
It's fascinating, and congratulations, Scott. It's just so cool to see how this is developed from your own game, what you've done in your career. No, in all sincerity, congratulations.
Thank you.
And what I find really fascinating about this is that a lot of people would say, "Oh, hey, look, I'm not interested in data analytics. Hey, I'm going out to play golf and have fun." But the majority of golfers who say they're going out to have fun they want to control their life. They want to control their score. So they go out and say, I'm committed to doing this in my swing today. I'm going to pause at the top, or I'm going to lead with my left hip, etc. All this kind of stuff. Because why? Because we're under this delusion that our life will be better if we're trying to control it. We're trying to control it. But here you're saying, this is what I find so fascinating. You come from a combined playing background with, obviously, like, you're a freaking math whiz. I just love hearing you talk and pull these numbers from the air, but it's a psychology of it.
Yeah.
It's coming at it at a different way, and it's giving up control to gain control. Again, it goes against this culture that we've got, this big culture and this golf culture.
Well, I just laugh at everything. We tell ourselves all these little stories that aren't necessarily based in fact or truth. And then we live our lives by it for however long, and perfectionism is not people say all the time, they wear it like a badge of honor. Well, I'm kind of a perfectionist. Well, that's a shitty thing to be. I would stop.
Exactly.
Hey, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I know what you're talking about.
One of my daughters goes, Daddy, I'm pretty sure you have ADHD. I'm like, is that good? No, it's not good.
Yeah.
It's that obsessive nature.
Yeah. Well, you're sitting here looking at this simulator right behind me here that I've got this putting green tilted at 1.5%. I'm terrible with tools. And when the guys that were in here trying to build it for me were screwing around with them, I'm like, just let me do it, because I couldn't even handle watching them screwed up. So trust me, I'm reforming, not reformed perfectionist. But it is understanding that saying you're a perfectionist is a huge limiting belief. It's going to give you I'm a perfectionist, so I can just remain a lunatic. And it's like, well, again, as I jokingly say to people all the time, like, how's that panning out? Exactly. Why am I talking to you if it's working? I don't talk to guys when they're doing well. DJ is not calling me, hey bro, can you help me? Like, no, dude, what you're doing is working, man. Keep doing that. I'm getting the guys that are kind of struggling, but they're the people that feel like they're better than they are, which most of us are. And once you can kind of let them see through that, again, that limiting belief, limiting factor, and just remove it, it's just not that difficult to be.
Scott, Tim and I have had endless conversations with each other and experts about mental state and the mental side of the game. And one of the things you say, one of the seminars I've watched, I've watched hundreds of hours of Fawcett material. So one of the things you've said was, the discipline is easy to understand, hard to do. Mm-hmm. Knowing what you're supposed to do is easy. And I've said this, Tim said it, and you've proved it. If I caddied for a 12 handicap right now, I guarantee you I could have them break 80. I guarantee it. Because I would never let them hit a shot that I didn't think they could handle. And when they're short-sided, I have them hit the middle of the green. All those things that we know to do. But when you don't have a caddy, part of what is difficult about the game is you're in a situation, you know what you're supposed to do, but having the discipline to do it is one of the hardest things in decade.
Well, it's funny how the brain works, because there's just little things that pop up in your mind that I'm like, I haven't thought of this in so long, it's ridiculous. But when I first quit playing professionally in 2001, I started an electricity company when Texas deregulated. And when I would take clients out for golf from, 02 through 05 or so, they would always be like, what am I doing my swing? I'm like, dude, I don't teach the swing. I honestly have no idea. I was just working with Como, so I knew there was more to the golf swing than what we thought with just these static poses and images. So I knew I could tell you something, but honestly, it may or may not be right. But I did each time say, let's do this today. Let me just tell you what to do on each shot.
Right.
And I'm telling you, they shot their personal best like over 50% of the time, which probably literally explains why my electricity company was as successful as it was, because I helped all these guys who are asset managers play better golf. I never would have thought about that. So even as an idiot at the time playing professional, but again, once I was just caddying for someone else at 12 and telling them what to do, I'd get them to shoot in the mid 70s. So consistently, it was ridiculous. Yep. By exactly what you just said. Hey, you got a 24, dude, just lag it down here. You're in the trees. Let's just don't make double. Yeah. And once you finish out a round, you're like, wow, that just wasn't that difficult. I didn't do anything crazy. I just removed the dumb stuff, which again, circling back to my main thesis, is when you finish a round of golf, those are the things you think you should have done different. You've got to recognize those in advance, in real time. This is a spot where if I do happen to shoot a couple shots higher, it's probably going to be because I screw this up. Let's just don't screw this up. And then you wind up shooting a nice score.
Well,
I was going to say, Timmy's worked with a lot of players, Tim, and you've helped a lot of people, settle them down, work on their mental state. But I think something like this, along with the work that you're doing, I think would help them actually physically lower their scores because they've already
100%.
lowered their temperature. And as I've said a bunch of times this summer, to keep your internal thermostat at sort of strokes gain neutral, is part of the thing that makes the game a little bit easier, Timmy.
Well, absolutely. And this definitely influenced my coaching of the University of Guelph golf team this year. So one of the things that, in terms of that piece around discipline, easy to understand, hard to do in all parts of our lives, is it comes down to basically, what are you committed to?
Right.
And if we're not committed to something, it's so easy to wriggle out of this thing that I said I'm going to do. And one of the things that I ask players before every tournament is what are you committed to? And a lot of it was around making smart shots from a place of emotional neutrality. If they could do that, they would play better. Our team, our men's team won one invitational, finished second in another, finished third in Ontario, advanced to the national championship. They hit the shots. And the thing that one of our players, a first-year player on our women's team, she won the Ontario Individual Championship, first time in the history of the university. And a key part of it was making good decisions and being committed to it. And it made a drastic difference in our team this year.
Huge.
Well, it's funny because as Howard was talking, I was making some notes over here of what I wanted to say next. And I do believe exactly what you just said there, Tim. I do believe that the outlier shots that they hit are all due to a lack of commitment, a lack of clarity, or you do pick a good target and then you kind of hope you pull or push it by the pin. That's what I try to tell people all the time is like, you've never hit a shot on a range and hope you pull it 15 feet. Yet all the time we are on the golf course and we're aiming 15 feet right of a pin and then hoping we pull it tight. And it's, again, that's one of the things that's just patently, obviously dumb. It's incredible. But every tour player that I work with, that's when they're struggling, they're like, dude, I'm doing that like 9 shots around. There you go. And so these outlier shots, again, I show people Aaron Wise's shot pattern from a little practice session we were doing, and it was 20 shots with a 7-iron at 190 yards. And discounting an outlier, the shot pattern was still 26 yards wide. The 15th hole at Innisbrook on the Copperhead course on the PGA Tour, I use that green because it is 27 yards wide. It is essentially the exact width of Aaron's shot pattern. And when I show people Aaron's 7-iron shot pattern, they're always like, there's no way it's that big. Okay, then why is it literally twice that size on an actual golf hole on tour? That's because you've got guys, it's this front left hole location. They're trying to draw it to the front left hole location. They're either flare double crossing it or smothering it, or they're aiming towards the middle and kind of hoping they pull it. It's just a whole bunch of guys, again, even at the tour level, that are out there basically, just winging it. It's so comically dumb. It's mind-boggling in hindsight. But again, I only know that they do this because I did it, and I just did it worse than they did, which is why I didn't make it.
One of the things in Decade, and again, I use this quote all the time, and until you hear this, let me put it this way. As soon as you hear this, you go, oh. For years, I think if someone would have asked me, I would have said, okay, is your shot pattern a rifle or a shotgun? Well, I would have thought, okay, well, you're aiming like you're aiming a rifle. But as you say in Decade, it's a shotgun blast. And the thing is, even if you're the best player in the world, you don't know what shot's coming. So the idea is to aim correctly so that over the course of 20 shots, now your Aaron Wise example is so good because he's one of the best players on earth, and his 7-iron dispersion is what Scott's talking about, is 26 yards. The rest of us suck at this. What's our dispersion supposed to be? So if you're a guy like me go ahead.
I was just saying, the funny part about that Aaron Wise shot pattern too is he was trying to hit it technically 188, and it's the only place he didn't hit it. Like it's literally like a donut around his target. And I say this as a joke. Aaron at the time was the reigning PGA Tour Rookie of the Year. He'd won on tour just a couple months earlier. Like, this dude's really, really good at golf. He's clearly better than I've ever been at golf. So I'm not poking fun at him, but I'm
for
like,
sure.
It's the only place he didn't hit it.
But when you use that example, for an 8 handicap and you're 175 to the green and you happen to be hot pull comes up or block it right. My problem was I didn't know this. And so I would get mad at myself. I was trying to be this disciplined golfer and I had this show about the mental side, but I'd still get pissed at myself thinking I was supposed to hit better shots than I was. You know, I used the example the other day to somebody I was playing with, a higher handicap guy, was 11 or 10 yards off the green and pitched it to about 15 feet. And I said, good job. He's like, yeah, I wanted to hit it closer. I go, well, you know, on the PGA Tour at 11 yards, their whole proximity isn't a foot. It's like 6 or 7 or 8 feet. When you know that, it lowers it helps with your expectation management. And I'll tell you, it is one of the things that made the single biggest difference is understanding that I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to not be, to not hit those outlier shots and then to be happy with what the results that I got.
Well, again, this just isn't common sense. So even at the top 100, I'm speaking to 3 of Golf Magazine's top 100 teachers in the world. And we're standing next to this circular table. And it looked to me like it was about 6 foot in diameter, not much more, not much less. And I pointed that table because we're talking about putting and speed and everything. I'm like, pretend the hole was cut in the middle of that. How far do you think you could go out and still lag it inside of that circle? Not 100% of the time, just 75% of the time. And they were all like, I don't know, 50, maybe 60 feet. On tour, they get about 75% of their first putts inside of 10% of the length of the putt from outside 30 feet. So 30 feet, they're going to get about 10% within 3 foot, which is a 6 foot diameter. I'm like, you're saying 50 or 60, and it's like 30, maybe 35. Right. And it's just unreal when you start looking at these things. Like, I feel like I could chip it inside of that. Once you put a 6 foot circle out there, it's really big looking. Now go put a 16-foot circle around it and just say, chip it inside of that, dude.
What I find really interesting, again, fascinating, is that you are exploding a lot of things that people take as truths or maxims. You know, you have to try, like, I remember when Bob Rotella back, and he started to say, you have to try to make every putt, or pick out the smallest target possible. If you're going to hit a shot, you're not aiming at the back pin, you're aiming at this leaf. And what I think you're doing with that example there is showing that a lot of this stuff that we take as the God's truth in golf is in fact not true.
Well, just to show some semblance of humility, back whenever I was working with Maverick.
Some semblance.
You don't need to on this show, Scott. I know who you are.
Just to show some semblance of humility, back when Maverick McNeely was still in college, he was asking me, he's like, find me something to work on. And so I was going through his stats and I was like, you could leave a few more putts short. And he went, I'll never say another word to a positive strokes gained putter in my entire life, because it totally screwed him up for a little while, because he's out there trying. And finally we deciphered, he's like, I don't feel like I'm being aggressive. And so the little cliche that I want to bring into the game is I need you to feel aggressive while not being aggressive.
Right.
That's the thing. When you listen to guys like Mickelson talk about, I'm being aggressive from 20 feet. Well, then I go dig into his stats that week and he's literally leaving 30-40% of his putts from 10 to 30 feet short while having a great strokes gained putting week. And it's like, I don't think he's BSing. I think he believes that. I think he believes he's being aggressive, but I guarantee you not many people would think Phil Mickelson saying I'm putting aggressively would be leaving 30% of his putts short. And, what's funny is, like, even Keith Mitchell at the CJ Cup, he basically went brain dead making every single putt that he was looking at. And he still left 20% of his putts. I should look at this because I haven't quoted enough, but it's from like 15 to 20 feet, 15 to 25 feet, something like that. He left 20% of his putts short. Now, he made basically every other single putt that he made, but some of those makes should have, on a normal week, should have come up short. A few of them should have gone long, but he still, even while making basically everything, he still left 20% of his putts short.
You know, and one of the things one of the fallacies of watching tournament golf as much as a lot of us nerds do is, and again, I've had this conversation, I'm sure Tim has as well, where I'll talk to somebody, they'll say, they won't believe one of the stats I give them. I say, you know, on the PGA Tour from 150 yards, 75% of the time, they hit the green. The rest of us suck. And they'll say, really? I go, listen, when you're watching golf on television, you're watching the best players have a great week. When we talk about average proximity to holes and strokes gained, we're talking about the Thursday, Friday guys as well.
Oh,
you know, we're talking about the guys that had that shot 71, 70 and missed the cut.
Well, the problem is everybody wants to go out and they want to hit the hero shot and remember it. Like,
right.
And again, like, I don't disagree that maybe I do disagree, but I'm trying to be nice. Maybe it is fun to pull off the hero shot, but how many of those hero shots do you pull off to actually get to brag about in the 19th hole? I mean, 1 in 20. I think it's far more frustrating to have 19. Why the hell did I just try that? That was a bad idea. Than 1. I pulled it off and you won't believe this. I hit it to 9 feet. Like, who cares? I mean, it's just not, well, I mean, I almost had a hole-in-one on the cradle at Pinehurst this week. I hit it about an inch dead in the heart short. I was aiming right at the pin. Well, you know what? I actually landed about 6 foot right, and it took a hop down towards the pin. Like, had that gone in, yes, I was aiming at the hole, but it's not actually where I hit it. It landed out to the right and kicked down there towards it. But I sure as heck would. Well, I would, because I'm an idiot. I would have told everybody that's not where I was aiming technically.
Yeah, no,
but like when Zalatoris had his all-in-one in the U.S. Open, you know, Sean Martin, love you, Sean. Sean was tweeted out, Will Zalatoris just had a hole-in-one in the U.S. Open, and all Scott Fawcett will want to talk about is how he wasn't aiming at the flag.
That's right. That's not his
target. I don't text Zalatoris, nice hole-in-one. I text him after the round, where were you aiming? 4 yards right. So I naturally post that, like, you're right, Sean. He wasn't aiming at the flag.
Right. That was the hot hole that showed up.
Well, yeah, I love that because what you're talking about is that in this game played by human beings outside, you talk about variance, luck plays a huge role. And that's the thing I think a lot of people don't get about this game, is that particularly in putting, that I love the way you said it, sometimes the hole jumps in the way, which is luck.
But the long drive, the fairway jumps in the way. This is, again, I obviously helped Bryson for a long time. I just still consult Como on what they're going to go out and try to attack golf courses. And I'm telling him every single tee shot that doesn't go left or right, because Bryson likes to draw the driver, every other tee shot is a green light for driver. Now, on 18, it didn't quite work because he couldn't bend it enough and everything was just going to run through into the bunker. So he did drop back there for that reason. But get up there and hammer this thing as hard as you can, and the fairway's going to magically jump in a way. And again, I should add the caveat, within reason. Like, you know, you're not just literally swinging out of your shoes. Whatever the maximum distance you can put on it and still find it, that's probably about how hard you should be hitting it. And stop worrying about, I mean, again, people they'll look at my stats or look at stats on tour all the time and be like, well, he's only hitting 57% of the fairways. Is that good or bad? I don't know. How far does he hit it? What club is he hitting off the tee? If he's hitting a pitching wedge off the tee and only hitting 57%, that's probably not very good. If he's hitting driver 340, that's probably mind-boggling. But most importantly, even hitting 10% more fairways, there's only 14 tee shots around typically. That's only 1.5 more fairways. Right. It's just not that big of a deal.
I want to start to wrap things up, and I want to get back to something Tim said about what, you know, a lot of men in particular, but people that play golf, you know, they say they're playing for fun, but then they get mad when they don't make a good score. And
defense mechanism.
Yeah, well, you know, but and we talk a lot about this, Scott, about how men in particular don't like to. It's almost like, well, you know, they almost build in an excuse of they don't want to seem to be trying too hard, you know. But I've learned from all kinds of golfers that, you know, most guys want to shoot lower scores. Doesn't matter if you're a scratch or a 10 handicap. But one of the things you said, Tim, reminded me of, like, what do you stand for as a golfer? And I've said to a bunch of guys this summer, if you stand for lower scores, if that's what you stand for, then you need to conduct yourself accordingly. Because don't tell me you want to shoot a lower score and you're trying to fit it in through some trees over a hazard onto the green, a shot that you might pull off once in a lifetime. Well, that's not standing for a lower score. I've said this a bunch of times too, that wherever I am on the golf course, I'm making a decision at that point. What's the lowest score I can make from here to the hole? And I just do that, as you said, Scott, just rinse and repeat. Just make that decision every time for 18 holes. But what is it, Tim, that stands in the way, men in particular? Why can't we live that? Or why don't we live that word? We say we want to shoot lower scores, but in reality, we're just trying to look good.
Well, I think a lot of it is that we're concerned, how are we going to look? Am I going to look like, am I a brave person? Am I courage? Or do I have confidence in my game? Or, am I Mickey Mouse? And I think that always seeking external validation piece is huge. Why do people fall susceptible to car advertising or just doing things that don't make sense on the golf course? Is how will we be evaluated?
Right.
And I think that's why I always come back to this, often to that piece of commitment. What are you really committed to?
Oh, I think that's honestly probably a brilliant way to end it up, Howard. That's why you're so good at this. But I stand for lower scores too.
Yeah.
I can't believe how many people come into my threads on social media and like, you're not making the game very fun. Fine, don't follow me. I don't
right.
Notice I don't log into the golf course architecture threads and talk about the Redan and Cape holes. I don't give a shit about them at all. There's nothing on this planet. I'm a math guy. I can't write a sentence to save my life. I damn sure don't like art. So that's not my deal. If it's your deal, knock yourself out. When people say, doesn't this make it not fun? I'm like, no, I don't like being frustrated on the golf course, being more over par than I need to be.
Right.
And I just don't get the argument whatsoever. But now, again, I do realize, as I've been teaching this for a few years, there's a lot of people that are into trying playing hickory. At Pinehurst, I couldn't tell you how many bags were full of hickory shafts and persimmon woods. And all I was thinking to myself was, that's a defense mechanism, because you don't want to show up at number 2 with your sticks and shoot 87. Yep. You want to say I shot 91 with hickories. That is my God's honest belief.
I believe you too, man.
Yeah. I think that if anybody was actually introspective and like honest with themselves, you don't have to tell me, wow, you're right, Scott. That's why you're doing it. I don't believe it for any other reason.
Maybe. I mean, there could be somebody that has an interest in historical golf, and that's fine. But I've said this a bunch of times, that if you stand for lower scores, which most guys, as they're driving home frustrated from another day of the golf course, again, Tim's known me for long enough to know that my frustration level has shrunk so much because I did stand for lower scores, but I actually, as I said earlier in the show, the discipline to do it is the hardest part of Decade, hands down. It's the easiest thing you'll understand when you get the app. Just go to decade.com. You can find it on your own. But when you get there, I
wouldn't go to decade.com. I don't know where that'll take you.
Where is it? Not decade.com? What is it?
Playinglesson.com or birdiefire.com.
Oh, that's right. It's not the actual thing. But just go Google Decade and figure it out.
Yeah, you'll find it.
But very early on, you'll go, oh, I understand this. But when you're standing on the golf course, and that's the last thing I'll say, I'm playing in the Senior Am. I'm excited. I'm having the best summer of golf. My handicap's never been lower, and I'm playing in one of the biggest tournaments I'll play all summer. I've told the story on the show. I go bogey in the first hole. By the way, I'm also playing with the 2019 Senior Am champion. I want him to know I can play golf. So there's all that shit going on. I bogey the first hole. I bogey the second hole. The two guys I'm playing with, par. I'm on the third tee, and I smother hook it into the trees. The only way we find the ball is because there's a volunteer spotting. See my ball, I'm 160 from the flag, in between two trees, over a hazard, to the green. I'm on the golf course. I've made 2 bogeys in a row, and I'm looking through the trees thinking, nope, I'm going to go sideways. I'm going to make another bogey, but that's okay, because I'm not going to make whatever that, I can tell you this, Scott, 2 years ago, I would have tried that shot. I would have hit it I would have hit a tree, I would have been back in the hazard, I would have made a triple bogey, and that would have been the tournament. But the fact that I made the bogey, I had the discipline, the habit of being in that situation, that I hit it sideways, I hit it on the green, I made my bogey. It just kept me neutral because I knew I'd made the right decision. And I can tell you as I finished today, like that alone, that little nugget alone is the point of standing for a lower score, because I didn't care that I'd made the 2 bogeys already. I wasn't going to make worse than bogey from where I stood. Because that's
it's just irrelevant anyways. There's nothing you can do to force it back. I mean, that kind of reminds me when I played in the 2019 US Mid-Am. My daughter's birthday was the day before the first round, so I'm going to be super dad and stay there and catch a 9 o'clock flight. I got in my hotel room at 1 o'clock in the morning for my 7:30 in the first round tee time, and I went out and I bogeyed the first 3 holes, and I'm standing on 14. I'm thinking, you're an idiot, dude. There was no way this was going to work out. But then I'm also like fighting the battle, like, well, you can't miss your daughter's 10th birthday or whatever it was. Like, you did the right thing, but damn it, but then I was like, well, you're here. Just pretend we're even. Like, you don't know what's coming next. I turned it even. Like, I played really good, and I was in like, I don't even know. I feel like I was in like about 10th or 15th place through the first round. But here I am having this like battle with myself on 4T, and there's nobody that knows this stuff or believes in it more than me on the planet. But it's what I tell people all the time. I could teach you decade in about 15 minutes, and my seminar is 4 hours long. It's because it takes you that long to understand the why, and the why is what makes you commit to anything.
And I'll tell you, Tim, the reason I bring that story up again is because in a very, in a round of significance, the biggest tournament I'm going to play, in that moment, my strategy understanding kept my mental, balance. I just felt okay about it. Whereas I know in years past, I would have had all those things, and I'm playing with these guys. I want them, I'm in a tournament. Because I'll tell you, the swing I made on the 4th hole was 172-yard into the wind 6-iron that I pulled to about 3 feet and made the birdie. I swear to God, I pulled it. I was aiming down the right-hand side of that green, and the hot pull showed up. But it was because I was in a good place to make that swing that it worked out. And that's the final thing I think for people to take away, that the strategy informs the scoring, but it also helps your skill level.
Absolutely.
Because when you're not throwing clubs after you've made a triple, you're in a place where you can sort of execute shots without all that noise, Timmy.
Yeah, well, the thing that I wanted to just add on as a kind of a concluding piece for me is that I used to always look for salvation in how I hit the ball. Yeah. It was like, was my swing in the slot today? Was I hitting it solid? And I just love the phrase, Howard, that you used this year, is that decade takes the pressure off your ball hitting.
Yeah.
And that's the big piece for me, why I think people should check this out, is that there's more to this game than just, can you draw your 5-iron or transfer your weight? And when you understand that, you can have way more fun and hit it better and score better without being so focused on my score, my identity, what my freaking handicap is. That stuff will take care of itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're committed to just making good decisions, having fun, lowering the thermostat, et cetera, wow.
I have 2 things on this decade card that I would end it with. And the 2 most important things that I've learned in the 7 years of teaching this now are Tiger's, when he says, I'm aggressive, but I'm aggressive to my spots, first and foremost. But the last thing on this card is you must learn to focus your inner conversation on things you can influence. Ask yourself, can I do anything about this? If the answer is no, move on. You have no other choice. Like, if I can't change anything, well, Howard, you and I are 3 over on 4T. They're not going to let us go play these holes again. Guys, I didn't get in till 1 a.m.
That's right.
None of that stuff. So there's nothing I can do about it. So you better figure out a way to move on. And that's not easy to do, which is why I talk about meditation and Sam Harris and all that stuff
present,
so much.
Yes.
Being present. That's it.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to let you go because the next time we have you back, because that meditation piece is right in our wheelhouse. We've been talking about it for as long as we've been doing the show. But as you can tell, I'm a huge fan. I didn't even play this as many times as I could. But like I said, no one has tried harder to get better at this at the amateur level. I've never met anyone that practiced as much as I did. And this year, like I said, it made such a significant difference, including a couple days ago. And I bogeyed the first hole on Tuesday. I'm playing with 3 other guys. Everyone's a scratch or better. Mike Dinner is like a +3. And I bogeyed the first hole, and we're going to the second hole. And, when you have that little feeling, it's like, I don't want to bogey. I bogeyed the first hole from like 140, so it's a shitty bogey. And then I birdie the next hole. I play the next 14 holes 4 under par. So I'm 3 under with 4 holes to go. Now, I had a couple of shaky bogeys on the way in, but I finished shooting even par. And I can tell you, a couple of years ago, if I shot even par, I would have said, hey, let's go for wings. But I shot even par, and I was literally going, how did I fucking bogey the last three of the last four holes? I just, it's just switched the whole way I look at the game, as opposed to, thinking that those bogeys came from the fact that I mishit some shots. They were just a couple of poor decisions and a little bit of variance that went against me.
Well, you see everything a little bit clear. I mean, just a little more clarity once you're looking at it with a better lens looking backwards. It's not just all physical. Did I make some mental errors? Because they usually always are.
Hey, Scott Fawcett, thank you very much. Tim, why don't we just hang on and we'll do a couple extra minutes as we thank our sponsors. We'll let Scott go. I know you got to play, but we'd love to have you back.
I think he put his golf shoes on.
Scott's got he's on a podcast every other day. But just Google Decade, and maybe in the new year we'll have you back, and maybe as the season approaches here in Canada in March, we'll have you back and maybe give away a seminar, not a seminar, but give away a Decade.
I'd love it.
The app, whatever. By the way, when is the app getting changed for Android?
Who knows? When are you going to buy an iPhone? It's not our fault that you're on a. It's not our fault that you're on an operating system that has a million different iterations out there.
Whatever. I can't afford an iPhone. All right, my friend. Take care, Scott.
Thanks,
Fawcett.
guys. See y'all later.
Bye.
Thank you very much. There's Scott Fawcett. That was exciting. I honestly, I was. I wanted you to stick around after because I thought, it's just too much for me. I have too many notes, and I was a little bit too.
I totally get it, man. Remember we had Fred Shoemaker on?
And, the first time we had Fred on, yeah.
Before we started, you looked down and go, I had this notebook full of notes and stuff. And I totally get it, man. And I think that's so cool. I mean, you've been doing this for 40 odd years or so. And here you are getting excited about a guest we're going to have. That's wonderful.
Oh, yeah, I'm doing the radio thing. No, I was excited to have him on because, like I said in the middle there, I don't know, like I said, even the other day when I bogeyed 3 of the last 4 holes on the 9th of November to shoot even par, and I kind of was like, ho-hum, shot even par, maybe I had it in my head I was going to shoot 68 or 69, but as I laughed with my buddy Paul Henrik, I said, that's like the most ridiculous even par round I've ever shot, and it's all because of that guy we just had on the show. It literally made a huge difference in my life in terms of the understanding of where score comes from. Mm-hmm. I mean, you and we've spent hundreds of hours talking about being present, being in your body, meditating, looking up at the horizon, being a good partner. No one helped me more than you when it came to understanding my place in the foursome and what it really, in terms of being outwardly focused and trying to be a good partner. And all that was great. And I thank you for it. And again, I'm grateful to all the people that have helped me, the Paul Doolins and the Sean Caseys. But I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not.
I think hyperbolic will work in this context.
It's not
exaggerating.
To say that guy has made the biggest difference on my golf scores of anyone I've ever met.
And I totally get it. Yeah.
It's like, you used to be very kind and say, well, in shows gone by in years, you'd say, well, you're kind of a scratch. And I'm like, well, I'm not really, but I am now. I'm like, it's crazy to me. I just finished this week, I finished the golf season shooting even par. And it used to be a big deal for me to do that. It's just not anymore. And again, I don't hit it any differently, really. Although you did say something I thought was interesting too. My strategic approach now has actually made me hit the ball better.
Totally. I believe that. And that's a thing that I think that a lot of people don't get is that it's not their swing. It's not the second or two that you're standing over the ball and swinging the club that makes the difference. It's what went into your preparation for the shot. That's where it is. And in that preparation, are you making it from a state of emotional neutrality? Are you hot? Are you angry? Are you resigned? Have you lost your focus? That kind of thing. Are you making a good decision? Are you picking a club that is going to work with the lie you have and all of that kind of stuff? That's all from your preparation. And that comes from so many of the things that Scott was talking about. But what I really think is interesting to me, and I'm so glad we had him on the show and had this opportunity, and he went along with us, is that, and again, you said maybe what you're saying should be exaggerated. I think that people are going to look back at Scott Fawcett as having made a major contribution to the game. In the same way Mark Brody made a big, Gene Sarazen inventing the sandwich. I don't know if Scott's in there with Gene Sarazen, but I really think that he's taken a lot of things and he's debunked them. And as he said too, more clarity. I mean, seriously, I thought that was absolutely hysterical. Yes, this is inside stuff. He's not leaving enough putts short. I mean, holy crap.
By the way, I'm going to compliment you. Emotional neutrality is one of my favorite things that was said today, because, it's another way of describing, keeping your thermostat at neutral. But emotional neutrality is another thing that I don't know why this is so emotional for me, because I spent countless hours talking to you and Doolin and Carl Morris and Ed Collins, and 2 times I spoke to Fred Shoemaker, and I just, help me, Fred. Why can't I get my head correctly in this game? And none of it made as big a difference. A lot of it, I'm sorry, not none of it. It made a difference in terms of my knowledge and sort of self-awareness, but nothing kept my thermostat from flaring up, which we both know it can. Nothing kept it down like this, because the 2 things I said to him the expectations, knowing what a good shot is, and knowing that a shot that I hit isn't as bad as I thought it was. I played with my brothers this fall. They both came to town. They both played, and they're both decent players. But I remember saying that to him, like, guys, David went from a 16 to a 12 just from listening to us talk about this stuff. That emotional neutrality comes from having a reasonable expectation of a shot outcome. And then once that shot happens, knowing that any number of outcomes can happen on any single shot opportunity, kept me in a sort of a nice space where I wasn't reacting to every shot I hit.
Well, exactly. So I think that decades made a huge influence, but there's also a lot of these other things that have also influenced. And what I have seen with yourself, when you talk about expectations, is, and I think we can apply this to everyone and almost everything we do, is we're trying to meet some sort of standard, our own standard. And if we don't meet it, well, I suck. I'm not as good. What people are going to think? My identity gets threatened. And I think what this helped for you is that you didn't play, you were no longer in this place of being 2 shots from a meltdown. You were no longer, your identity didn't weigh in the balance of whether you could pull this shot off or not. So in examples like that, you're 3 over and you go like, oh, this isn't about me. I suck or anything like that. Or I can't do it in a senior tournament where I really want to bring it. I went, no, if I hang in here, I've got some confidence. I've got some concrete evidence to go on, and that this will work out. And so I just think that in terms of, I can even see it in the way we do this podcast and just the way I've known you now for over 6 years, is that you're not this up and down guy as much anymore. It's more of a rolling wave.
Well, I'm also, I'm an old man now, Tim. I can't get all excited.
I don't think in 6 years you go from being a spunky guy to suddenly 61 and old.
Listen, I'm not. I'm. I was gonna say I'm not immune to wanting to, for egoic reasons. But I just to this story, like I used to show up to play with good golfers, and play with Gortner and people like Mike Dinner, who I played with this week, or Craig Watkins. These are people that I know have like +2 and +3 and +4 handicaps. And I would be like, I'd want to show up and play with them and show them that I could play. And I would be sometimes, well, like a lot of people, like insecure about like, I hope my good game shows up today.
Exactly.
But I can tell you and even after I bogeyed the first hole the other day, no part of me was wondering if my good game was going to show up, because I don't think of my game as my golf swing anymore. I just think of the game as, well, sometimes and I hit a really good drive in that first hole, like really good. Like I smacked it. I had a short iron into the green, and then just the wind came up. I hit it short and made it kind of a iffy chip, and I made bogey. So I was going on to the second hole without any part of me going, oh, I wonder what Mike thinks of me. And the guy that Mike brought to play was a +3. I wonder what he thinks of me. No, I didn't give a shit, because I know that variables of the game will allow me to keep on going, and I'm not going to make a triple bogey on the second hole, and I'm not going to force it, because I just trust that I have enough of the gameplay ability now that, I'll figure it out. And if it didn't happen, because I've made 3 bogeys in a row before and still functioned, everything would be fine. And that's different. That's the biggest difference for me from 4 or 5 years ago, is I would have showed up on Tuesday hoping that I played well, and that would wonder, I hope Mike thinks I'm a good golfer,
Yeah, I mean, we're attached to stuff like that. I mean, it comes with the skin bag.
The meat sack.
Exactly. We just have these attachments about we'll be happy when, I'll be safe, I'll feel good, they'll think I'm great if I do all this stuff. And it's all just illusion. Yeah. And what a guy like Scott helps us understand is that it's that stuff that gets in the way. And in fact, and there's some math now. This is a very cool part to me. There's some math that helps us back it up. And I think that's what makes it a bit more concrete than going and say, oh, I'm going to have a positive outlook today. That's good. Yeah. But we need, as our friend Carl Morris says, we need some evidence. That's where confidence comes from, is from evidence. So I think you got evidence that you'd be okay. And thus you didn't live and die with every shot. And I tell you, that's helped me hugely this year, is understanding that it'll be okay. And the thing that I wanted to just come back to or introduce was, you used to say every once in a while, and I didn't really get it. You'd say, let the game come to you.
That's right. Yeah.
And I would go like, I don't really know what that means. And maybe this is kind of Zen Koan from Howard Yoda or something. But I started to get that, say, in the example that you're 3 over after 3 holes, if you just hang in there, the game will come to you.
That's
You'll
right.
start to just swing, maybe if you did, it wasn't in the slot, or maybe it finds the slot, or you feel something, you have an insight, whatever, or you just play the percentages, you make good decisions, the game will come to you, rather than you trying to force the game by doing certain things, going to your Rolodex of swing thoughts, making a birdie because you just made 3 bogeys.
Well, I thank you for that, because one of the things that, Paul Henrik, who's my Yoda, always says, that good follows good. And in that situation in the senior am, after making 2 bogeys, I made a good decision not to make a triple from where I was, because I was like, another version of me would have tried to hit it through those trees, over the hazard, any number of chaotic things would have happened, and that would have been the day. But because I chipped out, which was is the decade thing to do, because I did a good thing, I made myself a pretty simple bogey. I hit it on the green about 35 or 40 feet. Wasn't the best shot I ever hit, but I 2-putted it. I wasn't trying to sink it for par and then make it double. And because good follows good, on the 4th tee, I made a really nice swing. Now I pulled it. I made it seem like I hit a bigger pull for the story, but I hit that shot to a couple of feet. It was a kick-in birdie. But because I didn't make a double or a triple, what was that word you used? I've already forgot. I thought
emotional thermostat.
No, the way you put it.
I forget. I'm so old.
Internally, I will have to go back and listen. I just gave you a compliment 10 minutes ago. God damn, we're old. But the intestinal
fortitude, visceral.
Oh, you said it. Oh man.
I'm in flow, man. I'm not conscious of what I'm saying.
No, but it was like when I said I said, oh, that's the phrase of the day. Anyway, whatever it was.
Emotional neutrality.
Because I was, and I mean it. I can see it vividly. I walked off that green. The other 2 guys in my group were even par after 3. I'm 3 over after 3, but because of my emotional neutrality, I was able to make a nice, pretty good swing on the 4th hole. Yeah, it's a good story because I made birdie, but it's true. And that birdie followed the good decision not to make a double. Good will follow good. And knowing, I know people remember, I did the 6-month decade course in 5 weeks. I just burned through it.
You got your PhD, didn't you, in decade? You got your PhD in decade?
I got my PhD in decade. And then what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to try and put this into play right away and see if this would, and it took a couple of rounds, and I sort of it took me a while to get used to writing everything down as I was doing it, and eventually I got used to that, and then making every decision based on the decade modifiers. We didn't even get into that, but just I looked at my handicap history today before we started, and I'm like, I'd forgotten that I'd popped up to a 2.5 at one point because, we came back from the lockdown. I shot some high, 70s or whatever. But that emotional neutrality came from having a really good understanding of what the proper strategy on every hole was. And that a 35-foot putt is not an opportunity to make a birdie. It's an opportunity not to make a 3-putt.
Absolutely.
That's how I started looking at it.
I totally get it. Yeah.
And if I did short side myself the odd time, rather than think, okay, here comes my super flop. You know what, Tim? I didn't hit one flop shot all summer because I thought, okay, I'm just going to get this on the green, 10 or 15 feet from the flag, because I'm not going to 2-chip. I'm not going to chip again. I'm going to 2-putt for bogey, and just doing those simple things. If you cannot make a penalty stroke, if you cannot 3-putt and you cannot 2-chip in your average round of golf, you're going to slash your score. Listen, we did a long show today. I'm going away. For you Swing Thoughts nerds, STDs. I'm not sure when we're going to do another show. Probably in early December would be my guess.
Oh yeah. Well, are you off to Italy? Is that where you're off to? Yeah, that's so cool.
I tell you what, I made a mistake. I'm wrong there. I'll be back and happy to do a show with you, Mr. O'Connor, on the let's say the 3rd of December is the next opportunity. And what will you be? Are you? What's the winter like for? Let's plug your business.
I'm really excited about 2 very cool things happening.
Yes.
One is I'm going to be coaching out of the Indoor Golf Academy in Kitchener. And it's still being set up, but hopefully it will be open by mid-December. And I'll be coaching out of there. They got some excellent plans, and so that'll be fun. But also I'll be also coaching out of the Office Golf. It's a new indoor facility in the south end of Guelph. And these guys are actually also really coming to the table to help boost, promote, raise funds for the University of Guelph golf team. So we're really excited about that. So that, and I'm setting up also a monthly free group coaching session where people can come together and we'll do some learning, but also to learn from each other. And I've facilitated groups like this for upwards of 20 years. And this will be the first time I've done it in golf. I've done it in men's work. So that's what's going on for me. And I'm really, really excited about it.
Can I come to one of those?
Oh, 100%, man. Yes, totally.
I'd love to do that.
Well, it's for people to come who are like golf nerds, and to talk about the game in like a way that you have permission to go a little deeper than you usually do, or in the bistro after men's night, and so you can talk and learn from each other. Because I really think that one of the coolest things about being in a group is you sit around and go, holy crap, I'm not the only one who's fucked up. Or you learn from other people's experience. They talk about situations or rounds, and you go like, holy crap.
Well, one of the things
I could work that
from and all these by the way, the details on what Tim's talking about at OConnorGolf.ca. I was going to say one thing. That I think a lot of golfers, and I've certainly found this out through doing the show with you, but and having sort of more open conversations, is that a lot of golfers really have that, that phrase about living lives of quiet, frustration,
desperation.
and so many golfers leave the course, on their way home before they get back into their non-golf lives, sort of beating themselves up, or, maybe even quietly thinking, why aren't I any good at, or, I try so hard, and this was me, I try so hard, why am I no good? And that Golf Galaxy ad that I love on the golf tournament broadcast, when they say, because we know inside every golfer, is a better one, that feeling that I could be better, but I don't know how or why. And I think that's what we find out when we speak to other golfers in groups, that a lot of guys think that way. It's like, and they're a little ashamed to say that they sometimes have a love-hate relationship. They love the game, but they hate the way they are inside of the game.
Absolutely.
So it's a case for me, man.
It's so hard because we put so much stock in our identity and the score and all that kind of thing. And what I find really interesting about doing this show, and even a lot of stuff we talked about with Scott, that a lot of these things are applicable to life. And that's why the phrase I've been using a lot lately is golf is life. Yes, with apologies to Ted Lasso and Danny Rojas.
Dude, I tweeted that the other day. I actually had the hashtag golf is life, man.
Oh, no, that's
it.
it.
Put that on a pouch.
Yeah, there you go. Well, they see the thing is that so one of the things I'm excited about starting this monthly coaching group, again, free folks, is that a lot of people think the golf season's over. No, it's not. Golf, like life, is a 24/7, 365 deal. How you show up in golf is how you show up in life. How you show up in life is how you show up in golf.
Yep.
It's all mixed together. So the way we, deal with things in our business life, in our personal relationships, and particularly the stories we tell about ourselves, about what we should be doing, how I suck, and all that. Oh, it's all applicable across the spectrum. So that's why I think golf never stops, because golf is life.
Well said. All right, Tim O'Connor, O'ConnorGolf.ca. The Humble and Fred Show will continue. We're back on the air Monday. I'll be there before I go to Italy for a couple weeks. Humble and Fred Radio. Actually, humbleandfred.com. I think we took the radio out.
You did.
All right, thanks to Scott Fawcett. What a deep dive that was, as the kids like to say. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Tim. Oh, by the way, thanks to TaylorMade and Jonathan Wong Apparel. And we'll see you next time.
When you hear the music.